For the second year in a row, the Kansas Jayhawks are absolutely fooling America into believing that they are an elite team. Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the evening edition of Locked On Baylor. We take a look around the Big 12 and how it relates to our Baylor Bears. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you making it your first and second listen today and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we're talking about Baylor's next opponent, the Kansas Jayhawks, who just barely squeaked by UCF last night, and why they might be frauds again. Plus a retrospective on the loss to BYU. Is there more good than bad to take from this? Talk about a Cam Stewart 360, 180, whatever. It's all that and more coming up on Locked On Baylor. First, we start with Kansas. The Jayhawks survive last night against UCF, a team they beat by 50 on the road earlier this year at Allen Fieldhouse. They need a bit of a generous call at the end of overtime. I definitely think that UCF night was shooting. That should have been a shooting foul. But overall, I thought Kansas did make plays down the stretch to win the game. And now that's Baylor's next opponent on Saturday in Waco, a place the Jayhawks have not won since before the COVID pandemic, right? Yeah. That great college game day in 2020, which was just weeks before everything shut down. They have not won there since. And here's Kansas still sitting in the top 15, obviously preseason number one. All this hype of what they added in the portal, what they brought back with Hunter Dickinson and DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams, and they were a nailed-on Final Four team. And some people really in the know in college basketball still believe this is a nailed-on Final Four team. I am here to tell you that they are not, because I thought they were going to be a Final Four team. And I think when they're fully healthy, they could still challenge for that. But what we're seeing right now at the beginning of February, by the next time we'll be playing here, is an eerie repeat of what Kansas went through in 2023-24. A team that Bill Self completely quit on, told us as much for some reason, says he checked out 3 weeks before the end of the season, and was one that, people were calling one of the worst teams Bill Self had ever had at KU. And then he goes into the portal, brings in some big names, and it's all of a sudden like business as usual. Here comes Kansas again. Preseason number one, Hunter Dickinson's coming back. All is good on the prairies of Lawrence, Kansas. Except it's not. It's not good. Because you look at it so far, they're fifth in the Big 12, which is not great in and of itself, but they are 6-3 in the conference, which is a game better than Baylor. That's why this Saturday's matchup is going to be so massive. And the thing with it is, just like last year, you look at how they play against the teams that are ranked higher than them, the elite teams in this conference. They're 0-2 so far. They got worked in Ames against Iowa State. They kind of kept it somewhat interesting for 30 minutes. They lose by 17. They were not the better team in that game. Iowa State showed them early and often they were not the better team. Houston, a game they had in the bag at home. Real tough for Kansas to lose at home for a couple of different reasons. They totally blew that one too. So you look at the teams that are battling for this conference championship, kind of that elite three. To be quite fair, I thought Baylor was going to be making an elite four. They didn't. Those three, like Kansas already lost to the two ahead of them. They're 0-2 in that. So like Baylor, they're bullies. They beat up on the weaker teams. And when they get shown some adversity, they haven't handled it very well. The other conference loss was to West Virginia, by the way, which has faltered a little bit since then. So this is not your slightly older brother's Kansas Jayhawks. Again, this is what we were saying last year. And you look at the numbers, just the team numbers, they're a little bit better offensively. They're about 2 points better offensively. They're still pretty solid defensively like they were last year. They're not a good three-point shooting team like they were last year. And like they were not a good three-point shooting team last year either, I should say. And in terms of the rebounding, which you'd think would be a real big advantage to KU, KJ Adams, terrific leaper, awesome undersized rebounder. And of course, Hunter Dickinson at 7'2", 7'3", should be one of the best rebounders in the country. Well, their rebounding margin was not all that great last year, and it shrunk this year, like to a third of its size. Their rebounding margin was about 6 last year, 6 more rebounds than their opponents per game. Now it's about 2.5. With Hunter Dickinson coming back, boy, that's no good. And another thing looking at last year was they weren't healthy most of the year. Kevin McCullough was a big part of that. Just you never knew when he was going to be in the lineup, and when he was not 100%. Same thing's happening this year. You know, KJ Adams sustained a bit of an injury in this last game. He's up in the air for Saturday. DeJuan Harris did not play against UCF. He might not play Saturday. And I'll say this from watching KU this year, they're a different team when DeJuan Harris is out there. He is a much bigger threat offensively than he was last year. He's been an awesome point guard for them. But if those two guys don't play, I don't know that they have a chance against Baylor, which is wild to say because I think Baylor's had one big time win this year, and it was 2.5 months ago. And I'm also not big on the Hunter Dickinson train. I've said it before. He's one of those guys who can give you a real good 10 minutes and makes the stats look good and goes missing for the rest of the game. He did it in both games against Baylor last year. KU was able to split it. They won the game at home when Jaden Nunn missed, the game-winning 3 at the buzzer. But he's just not someone you fear in 2025. You know, and he's that guy in Town League basketball who is still fairly athletic, but certainly not the best basketball player. He's just really tall. You know, we'll just grab rebounds over people because he's taller. We'll finish at the rim because he's taller. I mean, even the way he runs down the court, he doesn't look like an elite athlete. He doesn't look like a National Player of the Year. And his numbers are they're nice. They're fine. They're all Big 12 kind of numbers. 16 and 10. That's pretty good. 53% shooting for a guy who only shoots at the rim. Not great, but 15 and 10. That's fine. Well, here at Baylor, we have been knocking Norchad Omier recently, including an awful game he had against BYU. He averages 15 and 10. So really, Hunter Dickinson is not giving you anything more offensively on the glass than Norchad Omier is. And Norchad Omier is a much better defender. And Dickinson's got about 6 inches on him. And Norchad's going to take him to task on Saturday. I'm guaranteeing that. Might not result in a win, but I think Norchad's going to take him to task. So you don't have your full allotment. The best player you have out there is still overrated in Hunter Dickinson. I just don't think this Kansas team is a Final Four team. I don't. I think they're fooling you, and they're fooling Jay Billis, and they're fooling Ted Emmerich in America again. They're doing it. They're fooling Chris Spatola. They're fooling Pete Souza. They're not fooling me, and they're not going to fool you after this game Saturday. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Is Kansas just a fraudulent team once again? Should we start talking about Bill Self as a fraudulent head coach? Maybe that's a bit too far. Let me know in the comments below. Coming up next, we'll talk to you about the postmortem of that BYU loss and why there are some good things in there for Baylor. That's coming up next. But first, Super Bowl 59 is here, y'all. It's set up. We've got the Chiefs. We've got the Eagles. I know, but we'll have to watch it. There's no better way to make every play more exciting, even if you hate both these teams, than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you're going to score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, Baylor lost to BYU. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how great it was they lost to BYU. I'm not going to do that. As you saw from, the post game last night, you'll know that's the case. I thought Baylor had every opportunity to win that game, and they didn't do it. So yeah, we're happy about the fight, but they didn't win the game. And at the end of the day, You are what your record says you are. And right now, Baylor's record says they're mediocre and can have a chance to make a statement on Saturday if they beat Kansas. Because no matter what I said about them in the first segment, at the end of the season, if you say you beat Kansas, you beat Kansas. That's all that people see. But there is some good to take from this loss last night against BYU. And you've heard me through several losses for Baylor this season, or excuse me, several wins this season, saying there was probably more bad than good that came from it. And last night, I think there are some good things you can take away. I know some people are underwhelmed by Norchad Omier, and I thought he was terrible last night. But I think we've seen enough to know that that's not the player that Norchad is. Does he take too many ill-advised threes? Yes, still. But he's a better rebounder than that. He's a better finisher than that. He's a more assertive player than that, than what he showed last night. And so that's an aberration, hopefully, an anomaly, and he will come back to being his true self. And what is also great is how your freshmen played. You're starting to see that cohesiveness that we didn't necessarily see until a week ago, right? Like Rob Wright is the point guard. He's the facilitator. And VJ Edgecombe can score from anywhere on the floor all of a sudden. Best three-point shooter on the team, kind of out of nowhere. And he can take anyone off the dribble and he can finish against anyone at the rim. And they're both assertive as hell. They both are playing with confidence. They're both starting to think, I got the hang of this college basketball thing now. This D1 college basketball thing. And I think they do. I really, truly believe that they do. And I think that is where the smaller rotation is going to work well for Baylor. Matt Mosley tweeted this out after the game last night, or maybe it's during the game, about how, everyone talks about this small rotation. And yet, with Scott Drew's best teams, they weren't playing 9 guys. They weren't playing 10 guys. Even that national championship team was maybe 8 guys, right? You had your starting 5 plus Chama Chachua, Matthew Meyer, and Adam Flagler was strictly a shooter. He wasn't giving you a ton. Not that he didn't have a valuable role, but it's not like he was your secondary point guard or anything like that. So really, 7.5 to 8 man rotation. Right now you're working with a 7-man rotation. And I think you'll get Roach back. I doubt you'll get Langston Love back for anything meaningful. And Asamoah, as the more he's going to play, the bigger the role he's going to play. The same way Miro Little did last year, the same way Dale Bonner did a couple years ago in 2022. Like that, he's going to be a contributor. He's not going to give you 10 points a night, but he's going to be a contributor for you. And he could have a similar impact in terms of production the way that Chama Chachua did for that 21 national championship team. That's another guy wasn't giving you 10 and 8 off the bench. He was giving you like 6 and 4, 8 and 5, and I think Asamoah can give you that at some point here. And so it's worth noting that those teams did well with short, small rotations. And I think what you're finding out through these last 3 games, 2 wins and a loss, is what that rotation looks like and what people's roles are. So yeah, I really do think that there are positives to take away from this loss last night. You're still seeing an assertive VJ Edgecombe who is shooting the heck out of the ball right now. Jaden Nunn still needs to be better, but he did make some shots for you. He did make some plays for you down the stretch, some threes. He had one where he kind of took on a big guy in the paint and scored. He needs to be better. Don't get me wrong, but he showed you little signs of life last night. And I think you can bring in Jeremy Roach off the bench when he's healthy as a combo guard and give you some nice production there. And the roles are going to be more well established. I thought Josh Ho played a good game last night. You don't see it necessarily in the numbers. It's not something I highlighted in the post game, but I thought Josh Ho gave you a good shift last night. 9.7 rebounds. Turned it over only once in 35 minutes, 4 or 5 from the floor. Like, I'm taking that. This team needs to get better at free throws, obviously. And they still need to improve defensively. I thought it was very easy to score on Baylor most of the game last night, specifically in the first half. But I think probably more positive than negative. right? Because negative is what we've seen so far before. And it's not like they're running out of time for marquee wins. You would think it's a fine line. You would think it would be better by now than what it is, but they still have time to get some marquee wins in there. So I'm taking more positives from this loss than I am negative, which is not what I was thinking in the first half last night. But Rob Wright, VJ Edgecombe showed me some things. And we talked about it a couple times this year where Baylor would have a nice win and you say, okay, well, is this sustainable? Is this the way they're going to play throughout the Big 12? And honestly, what you saw last night from Wright and Edgecombe, if you get Norchad just playing any way that he knows how, I mean, last night it was like head up, rear end last night. But if he's playing to near his full capability and you have VJ and Rob Wright going the way they are, that's a sustainable form of victory. That's a sustainable way to play offensively. It's the best we've seen them offensively in 2 months. Defensively, still needs some work. But overall, I think you saw some things that you could take away and be happy about for this team towards making the NCAA tournament. The following is a message brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with TurboTax experts who can do your taxes as soon as today. That expert's going to give your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on everything else in life. They will file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only on iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you guys for tuning in to the evening edition of Locked On Baylor. We got a very special guest, Baylor alum, on the show tomorrow to talk some NIL, talk about Baylor hoops, what they're doing in that sphere, how they can get better, where they stand. Plus, I'm going to have another conversation with Jake Hatch. We're going to talk Baylor, BYU, why they're both getting slighted going into this football season, and why you could very well see those two teams in Arlington come the first weekend in December of 2025. Thank you so much for making it your first and second listen every day. You guys are amazing, the best Locked On fans I could ever ask for. Please leave a comment in the comment section below what you think about Baylor in this loss, what you think about Kansas going into this game on Saturday, maybe some score predictions. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Helps out the channel a ton. And find us wherever you find your podcast. That helps out a ton too. And we will see you tomorrow on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.